Welcome to your Health Facts podcast. Today, we're going to be taking a deep dive into the world of MSG, monosodium glutamate. It's something that I think a lot of people have heard of. Maybe they even experienced some of
Yeah.
the myths surrounding it. But we're going to unpack the science behind MSG and really look at its potential impact on our health.
MSG, essentially, it makes food taste incredibly pleasurable. You might have heard this term, Chinese restaurant syndrome, and,
Yeah.
it describes a collection of symptoms, headaches, dizziness, things like that some people report after eating foods containing MSG. However, scientific research really hasn't found a definitive link between MSG and these symptoms. But here's something interesting. While MSG is generally considered safe for human consumption, it's actually used to induce obesity and metabolic issues in lab mice. So that's kind of a paradox, and it begs the question, how does MSG affect these animals, and could there be implications for humans?
That is fascinating. It really does seem like there's a lot more to MSG than meets the eye. So how exactly does MSG impact lab mice? What makes it such a potent tool for researchers studying obesity and metabolic disorders?
Well, in mice, MSG overstimulates the hypothalamus, and you can think of this as the brain's control center. It regulates things like hunger, energy use, and even hormones. And this overstimulation can really disrupt the delicate balance of this crucial gland, and that leads to increased fat storage and a whole bunch of other metabolic problems. What's even more concerning is that this overstimulation can actually damage certain parts of the hypothalamus. And, that can lead to long-term consequences for the animals.
The hypothalamus sounds like it plays such a critical role in our overall health. It regulates so much more than just our appetite. So if MSG can disrupt its function in mice, it makes you wonder if there could be any subtle long-term effects in humans. But before we dive into that, maybe we could talk a little bit about the average person's daily MSG intake. How much of this flavor enhancer are we actually consuming?
Well, studies show that the average daily MSG consumption ranges from 590 milligrams to a staggering 2,330 milligrams. And some restaurant meals can contain upwards of 5,000 milligrams. And, this widespread use of MSG, coupled with its potential effects on the hypothalamus, that certainly warrants a closer look at its presence in our food. And another point to consider is that combining MSG with carbohydrates can actually amplify its effects, making it even more potent in disrupting our body's natural balance.
Wow, those numbers are pretty eye-opening,
hmm
especially when you consider the sheer amount of processed food that many of us consume on a regular basis. But amidst all the discussion around MSG, the question of its safety remains a bit of a puzzle. We see a lot of research that supports its safety, but there are also concerns about the potential long-term consequences that we've been discussing. So how do we navigate this seemingly conflicting information when making choices about our diet?
Well, I think it's crucial to remember that a lot of the research supporting MSG safety is actually industry sponsored, meaning it's funded by the same companies that produce and profit from it. And while this doesn't automatically invalidate the findings, it's important to be aware of this potential bias when you're evaluating the research landscape. Another argument that's often used to defend MSG is that it's natural because glutamate is found in many whole foods. However, I think this argument kind of oversimplifies the issue. There's a critical difference between the naturally occurring glutamate found in whole foods and the free glutamate found in industrially produced MSG.
That's such an important distinction. It reminds me of how people try to justify high fructose corn syrup by saying that fructose is naturally present in fruit. But just like with high fructose corn syrup, the way a substance is processed and concentrated can dramatically alter its effects on our bodies. So if we're trying to be mindful of our MSG consumption, how can we even track how much we're actually ingesting? It seems like it could be quite a challenge given its prevalence in processed foods.
Right, it can be very tricky. There's actually a loophole that allows manufacturers to avoid listing MSG on labels if it's present in amounts less than zero point 0.5 grams, and this makes it incredibly difficult to track our true MSG intake, especially since it can be hidden under various guises on ingredient lists.
That loophole certainly complicates things for consumers who are trying to make informed decisions about their diet. So if you want to be more aware of hidden MSG, what should we be looking out for on those sometimes confusing ingredient labels? Are there any red flags that can help us identify those sneaky sources of MSG?
Yeah. One of the most common ones is hydrolyzed vegetable protein, and that often contains MSG, even though it's not explicitly listed as such. And then additionally, you want to watch out for the term natural flavorings, because that can sometimes be a catch-all category that includes MSG without having to specify it.
It's amazing how MSG can be lurking in places that we wouldn't expect. To make this more tangible, could you give us some specific examples of food categories that are typically high in MSG? I think that would really help listeners get a better sense of where they might be encountering it most often.
Sure. You'll find MSG frequently in instant noodles, snack chips, canned soups, and bouillon cubes. It's also a common ingredient in processed meats, fast food flavored seasoning, mixes salad dressings, frozen dinners, savory snacks, gravy, and appetizers. Additionally, many flavored crackers, canned vegetables, and protein bars using soy protein isolates or milk protein as sodium caseinate contain MSG. It's important to note that while much of the research on MSG's effects on the hypothalamus has focused on rats, there is anecdotal evidence suggesting potential links to headaches, allergy symptoms, irritability, sleep problems, and dizziness in humans.
That list covers a surprisingly wide range of everyday foods. It really highlights just how pervasive MSG is in our modern diet. Avoiding it entirely would require a significant shift in eating habits for most people. While research on MSG's effects on the hypothalamus has primarily focused on rats, the anecdotal evidence, suggesting potential links to various symptoms in humans does raise some important questions. So given this, is there anything that individuals can do to explore how MSG might be affecting them personally?
Well, one practical approach is to experiment with avoiding processed foods for a few weeks and observe any potential changes in your well being. This can provide valuable insights into your individual sensitivity to MSG and help you make informed decisions about its presence in your diet. There's also a common misconception that industrially produced MSG is derived from natural seaweed as traditionally used in China. However, it's actually made from corn molasses, tapioca, beet sugar, and soy.
That's an interesting distinction. So it seems that even though both natural seaweed and industrially produced MSG contain glutamate, their sources and processing methods are vastly different.
Hmm.
Could you elaborate on how this difference translates to the amount of free glutamate found in each?
Sure. Industrially produced MSG contains a whopping 78.2% free glutamate, while natural foods containing glutamate have insignificant amounts. This stark contrast really highlights that fundamental difference between naturally occurring glutamate and the concentrated free form found in industrially produced MSG.
Those numbers are definitely striking. Understanding the prevalence of MSG in our food supply and its potential effects, both short-term and long-term, can help us make more informed choices about the foods we consume.
Exactly. It's all about finding a balance that works for you.
For more insights on health and nutrition, subscribe to yourhealthfacts.com. So it's clear that MSG is a pretty ubiquitous ingredient in lots of the foods that we eat regularly. And while it might not cause immediate problems for everyone, the way it's produced and its potential long-term effects, especially on the hypothalamus, are definitely worth thinking about. Reading labels carefully is crucial because hidden MSG is practically everywhere. So for those looking to minimize their intake, focusing on whole, unprocessed foods and being mindful of those sneaky hidden sources can really make a big difference.
Absolutely. Choosing whole foods over processed options is a great way to reduce your MSG intake, and it also provides, a bunch of other nutritional benefits.
Mm.
So ultimately, the decision of whether or not to include MSG in your diet is a personal one, but being informed about its potential impacts can really help empower you to make choices that align with your own, health goals.
Absolutely. Knowledge is power, especially when it comes to our health. We hope this deep dive into the world of MSG has given you some valuable insights and a fresh perspective on this often misunderstood ingredient. For those of you who are eager to learn more about making informed choices about your health and nutrition, we encourage you to subscribe to yourhealthfacts.com.